If you're joining us today, please let us know that you can see the screen and hear me, because I always say it, but I have had this happen before, Matt, where I've been presenting to no one.
Tough crowd. A tough crowd.
I know. It can happen. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Holly. Really excited to dive into today's session with Matt. Where are you at the moment, mate?
Actually in Jakarta at the moment.
Jakarta. So Esther's in Bali, so just a stone's throw Indonesia hangout here at the moment.
Just a short hop.
A short hop. I'm sitting here it's been about 43 degrees Celsius here today, so staying inside as much as possible. Talking to some other people in the earlier sessions in the morning, and they were like -5 and -10 degrees Celsius. So I'm not sure what's better.
Somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between is better. Yeah, for sure. So 6 a.m. in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thank you, Victor. Really impressive. Okay, so we're going to get started, mate. Take it away when you're ready.
Also, I just want to say thanks very much, Jared, for inviting me on. And I'm excited to share and discuss what personalized learning in PE is for me and explain a little bit about my journey through it. And obviously, I know we've got the function whereby if people are watching this live, they're able to comment and ask questions to Jared. And I really hope people do that. And this is like a chance for people to share their thoughts, ideas, or what they're doing in what you are doing within your classrooms at the moment. So just to give you a quick introduction into who I am. I'm Matt McGowan. I grew up in Chelsea Street, which is in the northeast of England. Generally play football summer, cricket football in the winter, cricket in the summer. I also did a bit of rowing because we're fortunate to have so many rivers around us. My experiences of PE at school was generally a sport-heavy PE curriculum, which was good and fine for me. When I reflect on what it was like for the other people who weren't as into sport and games, there's probably a lot of disenfranchised people, and I'd say that's had an impact onto how I approach teaching for myself. When I went to university, I went to Leeds Metropolitan. I did a sport and recreation development degree before moving down to London to do my teacher training, working in some inner city schools, which was a pretty great experience. But after that, decided to take a year out and moved to Buenos Aires in Argentina, where I tried to learn some Spanish, travel around South America. And it was really during this time that I decided to stay international, as it were, and looked for jobs at international schools.
An occurrence, isn't it? People just they go into the international scene and never leave.
Yeah, I think it's because being someone who's avoiding the cold weather as well. Don't want to be as hot at temperatures as you, Jared, but avoiding those minus temperatures in England. So I ended up moving to Cairo, where I spent 3 years and was actually teaching primary school PE, which was a really big challenge and a shift for me because my teaching experience before then was based within secondary school. There's also a school culture which kind of ostracized PE at a particular school, so it was difficult to challenge that and difficult to also be part of that. So when looking for another job, I wanted to try and find a school which approached PE in a different way. And I ended up moving to Bucharest in Romania, working at the American International School, which is a PYP school, part of the International Baccalaureate, which places emphasis on inquiry teaching. And during my 4 years there, I saw the benefits to student learning and also student engagement when approaching teaching PE through an inquiry approach. I've continued during those 4 years to develop as an inquiry teacher. And I suppose this is all part of my journey of being in a PYP school, which led me to question how I could personalize learning for students to really get them involved and engaged. As I mentioned before, I'm currently in Jakarta, where I'm on a year out, living with my fiance who is working here. And I'm studying my PE and sport pedagogy masters from the University of Birmingham. So just to give you a bit of an understanding of what we'll cover in today's session. There'll be a discussion on what I think personalized learning is, and I really hope that people do get involved and can comment to Jared, and we'll see what other people's views on personalized learning and how this can look within PE. Give you a little bit of background from reading of books by Daniel Pink and Kath Murdoch, which really kind of helped sow the seed, share, or what I'm about to share with you. And the example I'm sharing with you is something called iTime, which is from Kath Murdoch. And again, has links to Daniel Pink's work as well. And this really came about from when thinking about my classes. Students were really highly motivated and engaged within the PE lessons. But outside of school, I would say there seems to be either less movement or there's more competing things, screen time, computers, or just growing up in urbanized areas. I really wanted to see and hear about students taking what they did in PE and taking it home and actually leading more active and healthy lifestyles, and trying to think about ways which we can actually do this and engage students this way. So what is personalized learning? It's a bit of a buzzword, I would say, at the moment. And there's many ways to engage students within personalized learning. One of the reasons I like the PYP is the emphasis on inquiry. And I see this as being personalized learning as well. What I'm sharing with you today, as mentioned, was iTime. This is a much smaller part. It took about 20% of one unit, but could go on year long. It's really about placing the student at the center of the learning and making the student really a co-producer or a collaborator in their own learning. So that's my views. I don't know if anyone else out there has got anything they would want to add or share.
Yeah, I'll be sure to let you know. Just a few people, Victor's mentioned that, a bit of a struggle in the beginning with some of the elements of the PYP.
In terms of what, Victor?
Well, just a bit of a struggle for him in the beginning to understand how to use those elements in the phys ed curriculum. But we'll definitely, I'll curate some of the questions around personalized learning and send them your way. Has your philosophy changed a lot because you've been to quite a few different places?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I would say that's one of the advantages of international teaching, is that you do generally move around. And although schools are generally focused on the same purpose in terms of educating children, there's many different ways to do this and working with different people. And obviously now when you've got things like Twitter, it's easy to see what other people are doing around there. So I would say my philosophy hasn't really changed over the time, but I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, my actual practice in terms of how my lessons are structured, how I organize and plan the lessons has actually changed quite a bit from my initial teacher training, for sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, what I'm going to be sharing with you today is based on reading something by Daniel Pink. The book is called Drive, and it really sowed the seed for what we're sharing with you, called iTime. Daniel Pink uses a growing body of research which focuses on motivation, and he gives lots of real life examples and talks about what actually motivates us. And Pink argues that there's no need for extrinsic motivators, things like money or like stickers if you're in a classroom, and that if people just had 3 key ingredients of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, then people achieve more and would live richer lives. And that's something which I think we can all aspire to. So I just want to focus on what autonomy, mastery, and purpose are. So with autonomy was described as people acting with choice. So in this example, it would be very much students acting with choice. And it's different from independence, as there's an acknowledgement that we can work with other people and we achieve more. So it's kind of like autonomous and interdependent with others. And as I was reading this, the connections with personalized learning started coming out to me in terms of students acting with choice, and that social constructivist kind of approach of how people learn from and with each other. In terms of mastery, Pink called it a desire to get better and better. And throughout his book on this section, he referenced another book by a gentleman called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which I've probably pronounced completely wrong. I've just got that book for Yeah,
exactly how you're meant to say it.
Yeah, I did Google it before, just because I thought it's quite a public forum to get it wrong. But if people want to search for the book, it's called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And in this book, he talks about how for an experience to be optimal and most satisfying, there must be three things. And one of them is a clear goal. The second is for immediate feedback to be taking place. And the third is for challenge to be well matched to the ability. And as I was reading this, I was thinking that's exactly like how our classroom environments are set up. In terms of a clear goal, when we come into a lesson, pose a question, which is the students will focus on throughout the lesson. Immediate feedback is given or more questions proposed to the students to really challenge and extend their thinking. And we differentiate our activities to make sure that students are learning at their own speed. So going off Mihai, Csikszentmihalyi's work, our environment that we create within the classroom is set up for it to be optimal and the most satisfying experience for the students when we focus on these three key areas. And the third area, which Pink proposed, was for purpose. And that's this, people to understand the purpose of an activity, so students to understand why they are actually doing something, and so that they are able to see how it will extend or expand their abilities. So these were all things which I was thinking about as I was reading the book. How could this apply within my lessons or my teaching practice? As I said, throughout Drive, Daniel Pink gave lots of real life examples, and one which I'm going to share with you, which is one that we'll all have experience of and probably really appreciate, is Google. Now, Google do a thing called 20% time. It means in Google, all employees have 20% or 1 day a week to work on a product or a problem that interests them. So it doesn't have to be connected to anything else, but it's just something that really, really interests them. And they get 1 day a week to work on this. And this has led to some of Google's leading products, including Google Mail, Google News, Google Sky, and Google Translate, which living abroad would be eternally grateful for Google Translate. Also, another company which they talked about was 3M, who are the makers of Post-it notes. The Post-it notes actually came about from 3M had a similar project going where they gave employees 15% time to work on stuff, and that gave them their biggest selling product in total. And a Google engineer actually commented that just about all the best ideas, all the good ideas that come from Google, all come from this 20% time. So throughout the book, Pink emphasizes how intrinsic motivation is conducive to creativity. And again, this is thinking about how can we use this within a PE classroom. And it wasn't until I read The Power of Inquiry by Kath Murdoch, which is a great book full of practical tools and strategies which can be used right away. I would highly recommend it if you're working within an inquiry school in particular. And in this book, it actually provided a framework and the name iTime, which gives students 20% of their time to work on any project which they like. Now, the school which my fiance is actually currently working at has iTime, and they do it based within their elementary homeroom. It's built into the timetable and it goes all year long. I adapted this for a PE focus at the end of last year. I did this, it was the last module at the end of the year. It wasn't the best timing, but when I read The Power of Inquiry, I really wanted to give this a go before starting my year out. So students basically got, so I'll move on. Students got 20% of their PE time a week to dedicate to any topic which they wanted, as long as it was related to PE and healthy lifestyles. They were very fortunate at the American International School of Bucharest because they got 160 minutes of PE a week. And I know not every school is as fortunate or every student is as fortunate to get that amount of PE a week. And we'd initially planned for there to be 6 to 7 iTime sessions a week. But as it was happening right at the end of the school year, as normally happens with different concerts, school trips, and a couple of sessions were missed because of this. So in the end, only about 5 sessions took place. Sorry.
Idea of eye time, handing over some of that time for them to pick things that are passionate about and personalized for them.
Yeah. Okay, can you say that again? Sorry, Jared.
Just how much that challenges the norm.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that as well, because it's different. It's a challenge for the teacher to hand over that kind of responsibility, and that's something I'm going to be talking about in a couple of slides. And just giving the students like the autonomy doesn't mean that they're not really accountable for the time. This is all built into it. So although it may just look like you're giving them 20% free time, it's all structured to the point where they're accountable for their time, for their learning during this time. That's something which we'll be sharing with you, and it's something which is important, which we'll be going into. So because this was something completely new for the teachers and obviously for the students, we thought about how are we going to actually launch this to get students to actually think about the amazing possibilities which they could get their teeth stuck into. So we had a lesson, or part of a lesson, which just focused upon presenting them with different provocations to get them thinking and really challenge and extend their thinking in relation to what they could do in iTime. We had some grade 5 students to share their PYP exhibition projects. Now, for people who are watching and listening who don't know about the PYP exhibition, it's basically a 6 to 8 week module where students get to select any topic which they can research, and they end up presenting and sharing their learning to the whole school community. It's kind of like this culmination of the primary years program, and all students, teachers, parents come in and watch the students present on the topic which they spent 6 to 8 weeks researching. So it's kind of like a much bigger version of iTime. So we asked 2 of the presenters to come down from grade 5 and actually show the grade 4s. I did this with a grade 4 class, or grade 4 classes, and actually show the grade 4s how they could present and share their learning, because that was something about iTime, is that they had to share what they learned during this time. So again, putting the accountability on the students for their being responsible for the time which they were getting. One of the apps which you actually introduced me to, Jared, Coach's Eye, we shared some videos of Coach's Eye, whereby it allows students to record video, add voiceover, and draw on the video, and enable students to explain their observations or learnings from a specific skill. So the examples we gave them was to do a how-to video of a specific skill. And then the final provocation was we shared 2 TED Talks by students who were of a similar age to our grade 4 students. This again was just basically as an example of how could the students demonstrate what they've learned during their iTime project. So we really wanted to push and extend their thinking beyond just what they regularly did in PE. Pardon me. So after this initial session, students were given a week to basically think of what they wanted their target, or what they wanted to spend their time on. We encouraged them to share and discuss ideas with each other throughout the week, and they could also obviously speak to the 2 grade 4 PE teachers. And this really helped extend the students thinking about what was actually possible when they started sharing ideas and bouncing ideas off each other. It really started pushing what they saw as the possibilities of what they could do during this time. And the target setting for us was really important. It was important that students set something that was challenging for them to spend 5, 6, 7 lessons focusing on, or 7 30-minute blocks. It was also important to consider the time frame that they were working in, and that the target was actually coming from the students. It wasn't influenced by us, and it wasn't influenced by anyone else when we did this. It was focused on individual targets. The students did not work in the groups. That was something how we set it up. Because we place such emphasis on setting an appropriate target. We spent a fair bit of time discussing how this might actually look. And when discussing the targets which the students might be setting, we're thinking there's two different ways which the students can actually challenge themselves. There could be in challenge themselves on the topic which they've chosen, or how they are presenting their learning. So we asked the students to write down on the front of the card what their target would be for this session. And then on the back was this little graph. And basically, we didn't want the students to have a high challenge topic and a high challenge presentation style, because we thought they might get demotivated or overwhelmed and wouldn't be able to progress. Just like we didn't want them to have a low challenge topic and a low challenge presentation style as well, because it'd be too easy, wouldn't challenge, and wouldn't actually help students grow and learn. So we put this cross on the back of the target cards on where they thought their challenge and presentation style, how it challenged them. We said that ideal area was right in the middle of that box there. Now, as you'll see, some of the targets were really varied, and we'll go and have a look at some of the targets. Now, these are just some examples. Now, there were some people did do very similar targets. Whilst I said they were all individual, we expected students to work by themselves during this time. And so some of the targets were still pretty similar. One student decided to lead a basketball taster session for grade 1 students. A few different students wanted to focus on healthy eating and drinking, so they chose to research healthy food and drink recipes, and they decided that they would try and make a recipe book by combining theirs all together and actually making these drinks, foods and snacks together. Some more was to make a persuasive TED talk on why more boys should participate in gymnastics and yoga. This is because a particular student, who's a boy, saw lots of girls outside at lunchtime, and they were doing gymnastics and yoga outside during the summer, and all the boys would just run past them, go straight and play football, where he really wanted to participate because there's kind of a stigma around boys doing it. He wanted to make a TED talk on why boys should participate more in gymnastics and yoga. And then lots of people made a how-to tutorial video, which we'll see a couple of those right at the end. Again, some more examples to learn how to do a cartwheel and create a storyboard on the important steps and then perform for the class. And then the final one, to create a basketball lunchtime league for grades 4 and 5. Now, some of the targets were particularly ambitious. As you can probably tell, I've ended with the basketball lunchtime league one for a reason. After having conversations with the students, they would make their targets. We would individually speak to each student, and we would have to approve them. We would say that if a target was particularly ambitious, but if they really wanted to work at it, we let them do that, and we were okay with that. So that target actually stayed there during the time, which we worked on for the 5 sessions. Now, as we were alluding to before, Jared, this can be quite a big shift for teachers in terms of it is letting go quite a bit and giving over a lot of responsibility. And whilst we were really excited by the broad range of topics that the students had selected, it did make us think, me and the teacher who I taught grade 4 with, think about how this would actually look. How some of the questions which we had were, how are we going to communicate with all the students? How we'll be able to assess their progress? And that the students were going to be all over the school, and how are we going to know if they're working and or safe? So yeah, handing over responsibility to students was pretty daunting.
They would be challenged by just that idea alone.
Yeah, and honestly, when we were going through it, when we started, we were like, there were some points where we were just like, do we know what we've got ourselves in for? Because, for example, there'd be some times when a group would be, or a person would be outside practicing a skill. Some other people would be researching in the library, whilst another group could be in the cafeteria interviewing a chef who makes the food about healthy food and drinks. So there was a lot of responsibility placed on the students. And as teachers, we had conversations, open and honest conversations about this with the students and our expectations, and these were set. And they were made accountable for their time, which you'll be able to see a little bit more as we get further into how iTime actually looked from a session by session process. But seeing the students take on the responsibility, and honestly, they demonstrated self-regulation skills, which we didn't really see during our normal PE lessons. It's actually quite a humbling experience to actually give them this responsibility, and then to actually see them pick up the baton of the responsibility and really run with it in great directions. There's basically a sense just
and the opportunity to do it. Like,
yeah, and it's just as a teacher acknowledging that students are not totally dependent on you, and that we can give them this little bit of freedom as well. So just to give you an idea of what their planning the iTime looks like. So each session, students were giving a planning my iTime document. Now, I will share with you my blog where you'll be able to access all of these, and you can download them as well. So I'll access that, share that with you at the end. But each session, students were giving a planning my iTime document where they had to set themselves a target for each session, as well as a focus. This could be related to a previous session. So if someone got particularly or felt they were particularly distracted, their focus would be to maybe be working away from different groups. At the end of each iTime session, the students would reflect on how they felt about their own learning at the end of each iTime session. And then they also set themselves what they could have as a target for the following session. Now, one of the questions which we had before, which we go back here, is how will we be able to assess their progress? These iTime sheets became the main way that we communicated with the students. We handed them out, collected them in at the end, and we left comments on what they had done, what they had shared with us, and maybe also some further questions just to really try and challenge or extend the students' thinking. Unfortunately, in an ideal world, this probably would have been done electronically with a Google Doc. Fortunately, the school wasn't a Google school at the time. It is now. And there was generally tech issues. So we thought, because this is happening right at the end of the school year, keep it simple. We know what will work. So we did it on paper. In this corner down here, you can see all students' target cards, which is spread out on a notice board outside the gym. And on the notice board, Kath Murdoch's inquiry cycle is all set out across there, all the different stages. And we basically asked the students to move their target cards to where they thought they were within the inquiry cycle. And this is again going back to a question of how can we assess their progress. There's a really good visual aid for us as teachers to be able to see where they think they are, but it's also a really good visual aid for the students to see where they were in their own iTime projects. Now, we realized at this point that maybe the students didn't have the best understanding, despite the school using the inquiry cycle. The students didn't have the best understanding of it or fully understand how it worked. So this is something which we spend a bit of time on. And if we continue doing it, that understanding would really improve. And it's obviously dependent upon what your school is using. Is your school an inquiry school? If it is, they may be using the Kath Murdoch inquiry cycle, so you could use that. If they're using something different, then you may be able to use that as something else as well. But we just thought it was a really good visual for the students, and they really liked actually moving their cards around when they felt they had made a little bit of progression on their projects. So throughout the process of the iTime, as I said, we had around about 5 sessions. Each session they handed in their planning my iTime sheet, and the projects just kept on building up. And as you'd expect, the first attempt of anything new, there were some challenges. But as I said, alluded to before, standing back as a teacher during iTime, I saw the students innovatively, easy for you to say, innovatively approach and solve problems. For example, there was we had eye time. It was a set time. It was a set specific, a set block. And there were some students who wanted to interview the cafeteria manager, and they had to negotiate a time. They couldn't do it during our eye time. So they negotiated with the cafeteria, their classroom teacher, and me, their PE teacher, about going to interview, missing some class time, and doing the classwork that they were missing during their eye time. So just innovatively solving their problems. They showed resilience whenever they had a challenge in front of them that was placed. They were creative in terms of the ways that they shared their learning. I'm going to show a couple of ways, the final projects, which they shared their learning. And they are very different to each other and unique to the actual child as well. They demonstrated self-regulation skills, which we hadn't really previously seen in their normal PE lessons, being able to check their progress throughout different stages, their time management skills, which is something that we were really concerned about. They had 32 minutes for a session. Then we had to continue the lesson right after that. But they were really on point with all their time management and the target setting, which they did even at the beginning, but also for each session they had from that. You can see the more and more they did that, the more and more they got out of that. So in terms of the process, that was fantastic to actually stand back and actually see the students develop these skills and actually shows the skills which you wouldn't actually normally see in what I would consider a normal PE lesson for us. Now, as we get to the final projects, I'll show you a couple. Just so you know, the photo in the bottom corner don't have a video of. Unfortunately, this was the basketball taster session for some grade 1 students who came down, led by the grade 4 boy, but he also roped in some friends to help him. We had some girls who made their healthy meals. They all went in the cafeteria after school in their own time to go and make their meals, drinks. They shared them, discussed why they were healthy. Unfortunately, because it's the end of the year, didn't quite have time to get all their recipes and put them together in a book like we were hoping to. But that's something that we'd learn about for next time. And then I'm just going to quickly show you some of the videos, and I'll give you a quick introduction into people. So Esther, she was in her second year at the school. She was pretty shy. Girls, how I'd describe her. English was developing, so her presentation style. Sorry about the background noise, if you can hear that. So Esther chose presentation style where she was feeling comfortable. She could just talk into a device. It wasn't in front of many people, and it was on horse riding. So she recorded this outside of her own time, did it outside of the PE time, and then made this how-to tutorial video on how to trot, which I'll show you.
So before I start trotting, you need to say, you also have to have your heels down and straight back. Kick with your feet while you're going down. Turn with both reins, because some people think that you're supposed to turn with one rein. Sit 2 times if you're going to change trots.
Now, whilst in terms of the challenge, I wouldn't say she was a very proficient horse rider. She spent a lot of time outside of school. I wouldn't say that challenged her a lot, but in terms of presentation style, it challenged her to be speaking and actually share that and sharing it in front of the class. And she felt fantastic and was really excited when she was able to share it. June was another student who, as an example, set a target which was too easy for him in terms of presentation style and too easy for him in terms of the actual skill. He did this in one session, but he just really wanted to do it. And then he ended up setting himself another target, which he spent the remaining 4 sessions on actually focusing. So there's another how-to video.
You have a continental grip. The ball goes over your head. The body goes past the ball, then over in between your legs, and you get the higher end of the return by hitting the ball.
So there, he's actually researched what he considers to be the main teaching points of doing what he called a tweener, shooting the tennis ball in between his legs. So he's broken the skill down, just like Esther did. is being able to explain it and put that over a video of him actually doing it. The next video I didn't record with the best sound. I should have used microphones. This is the boy who wanted to share why boys should participate in more gymnastics and yoga. This is in the style of a TED talk. So I'll share this with you. This is a bit longer, this one. So.
Hello, everyone. I have a question. What would you say if I told you that boys aren't allowed to do gymnastics or yoga? It's not fair. It's fair. No. No stuff. Yeah, boys can do it. I believe that all boys should try to do yoga and gymnastics. If you haven't noticed yet, I'm talking about health and gender. So sometimes I like to go to the afternoon to do some gymnastics with them. When I go there, I usually see 3 or 4 boys with little sneakers. And when I start doing windmills, people pass through look at me like I'm crazy. Doing gymnastics makes you more flexible, helps you develop healthy bones at a young age, prevents diseases from getting to your body, develops your muscular strength, and also it's just fun. Yoga makes you more flexible, makes you more relaxed, takes the bad thoughts out of your mind, helps you strengthen muscles, and is also great fun. Overall, I believe that boys should do yoga and gymnastics, and it's okay for boys to do yoga and gymnastics. Thank you.
Hope I weren't too interrupted there by one of your apps, Jared, coming up across. It's just important to keep moving. You got to absolutely live what you preach. So just something which I may not have made clear before. When the students chose how they presented, they could choose to present to whoever they wanted. So Faiz, who's the boy who did their TED talk, he wanted to present to all the boys within grades 4 and 5. So we had to coordinate, or he ended up coordinating with the classroom teachers to find a set time where he could take 10 minutes out of the time in the library to actually share this. Again, for the lunchtime or for the basketball taster session, the student chose to present it like this. He organized it all himself. So it's really just focusing not just on the skills which you can get within PE, it's really those really important life skills which would go beyond the PE classroom. Not all the targets were successful. I mentioned earlier on about the grade 4 to 5 lunchtime league, trying to get that organized, set up and played during the last 4 or 5 weeks of school. Didn't happen, and that was totally okay. The work which this student did was absolutely fantastic. If he had more time, I would have been positive. It would have been a really nice tournament for the grades 4 and 5s, and he learned about setting time specific or time appropriate targets, and that's something he's definitely keen on doing when he's in grade 5 for sure. In terms of student reflections, at the end of the process, we thought it was really important to actually hear what the students got out of iTime. So we gave them some sentence starters. So the first sentence starter was, one thing I liked about iTime was, now for this, pretty much all the responses were pretty much unanimous. This is just an example of 2. The students absolutely loved the fact they were able to choose any topic and that they could choose their way of how to present their learning. That was unanimous across pretty much everyone who filled in the student reflections. The second question was one thing that would have made iTime better. Now these varied, and some of them were to have more research time, and then some were to be able to work with a partner. And that's something we discussed as a teaching group to decide if this was going to be individual or if it's going to be partners. That would be something we'd probably discuss again. I really like the fact it was individual. It's their goal that they're working towards. And in PE, there's very few times when students are working by themselves, and I think that is okay for them to do within PE. And there were some students who said that they preferred to have normal PE lessons, or what they considered the normal PE lessons. Upon reflection, these are students who had difficulty maybe self-regulating, the need to think about, and I would need to think about, how it can actually support these students to actually develop these skills. And the last one, which I just put one comment down because I absolutely loved it. So I've been incredibly selective and biased. But any other comments on iTime, the students summed it up way better than I ever could do. And they described it as fun, and it was scary as we needed to do something out of the comfort zone, or out of their comfort zone, which I thought was a really end. Of the school year probably wasn't the smartest decision, but I would say I wanted to give it a go before taking my year out. I did think it was a great success though. Students covered a wide range of topics which presented problems for supervision during iTime, but with communication with other teachers and placing the responsibility on students, they actually dealt with that really, really well. They took their work home to research, explore, test, and practice, and they were generally excited to share what they were doing outside of the class and how they were actually taking this home. And that was something which was really, really important to me when we were thinking about this. How are we getting the students to take what they're doing in their classrooms, taking it to be more active at home? Some difficulties was it was difficult to tell students that they had to wait for their specific iTime day to work on their project. Sometimes they would come in really G'd up, wanting to spend some time on iTime, but it wasn't their specific day or lessons. They just had to wait. So that would be something that we would really try to look at. And also target cards were designed to help students set challenging and realistic targets. This wasn't always the case, but I think that maybe just as the students were getting used to setting themselves targets, they weren't quite sure yet what was realistic. And I'm sure if they did this more and more, that this would be a skill which would really develop. As I said, the school which implements this where my fiance works, it's a year-long program done within the elementary school classrooms. So it's not just a PE focus, it's open up to absolutely anything. And that's definitely something which I would look at, especially if my next school has the amount of PE time which we did do in Bucharest, because we had plenty. As I said, I really hope this is a conversation, discussion. This is very much me on my own learning journey on what personalized learning is. This is an example of what personalized learning can look like as iTime. As I said, I think inquiry teaching is also personalized learning. I know Joel did a really good session on that the other day. If people want to contact me, they can go see me on Twitter at Matt_McGowan. And again, if you want any of the resources, you can go on my blog, the PE Senius, which I'll just quickly show you. Bit of a shameless plug. So yeah, PE Senius, it's under inquiry teaching, and it is actually the top or most recent blog post, because I've been pretty lax with my blog posts when I've been doing my masters. I haven't actually been doing as much. So yeah, if people would like to continue the conversation, I would love to actually hear what people are doing within their classrooms, or what they think about what they've heard today. Thank you.
Stella, you literally walk through the entire process of, something that challenges a lot of the foundations about what people, expect. And, a lot of people would just be completely daunted by that. A few questions have come through, like how, in the future, how would you identify if students are ready to self-regulate some of their learning? Or were you surprised by just how ready they sort of ended up showing?
I was surprised, but I was expecting a lot more issue and problems. But I think going back to like the motivation of the students, them actually choosing their topic and choosing how they were presenting it, they were motivated and super keen to do that straight away. And I don't know if they had that freedom or responsibility in other areas of the class, but they didn't normally get that much. I would say I place a lot of responsibility on the students generally within PE, but that was taking it to the next level. And I was really impressed with how they handled it. Obviously, there were some students, and that was something I highlighted, that need to think about just supporting those students who need a little bit more help throughout the process and dealing with all this responsibility, time management, and set themselves appropriately.
Amazing, like really, really incredible. I mean, especially when all the research points towards having autonomy as, you know, a huge indicator in drive and motivation, like from the book that you pointed out. Yet sometimes we remove that completely in our lessons and then expect that it should just happen.
Yeah. I know the PYP changing, they're talking a lot about agency. This ties, I believe this ties really into talking about the PYP and agency within student learning and seeing them as collaborators within the process. And it's not just the teacher imparting knowledge upon the student, they're actually a living, breathing part of the actual process of learning or their learning.
Yeah, I mean, this lesson's a great follow-on from what Joel did in some ways yesterday with the inquiry process that, you know, he had gone through a couple of examples. And Evans asked a question about whether you could imagine that this sort of personal inquiry work could work well in collaboration with homeroom or other teachers. Do you think that could be another opportunity as well?
Yeah, for sure. So basically my fiance works at Jakarta Intercultural School, and they have it based within their elementary homeroom. So when they do it, it is the homeroom teachers which are doing it. So it's not focused within PE. It's focused on absolutely everything. So they'll have some students working on a music project, some people will be working on drama, some people will be doing some writing, other people are doing PE. So in some sense, it's much, much bigger in some respects, even more daunting than it's just been within PE. But that's built within their school timetable. And that's something which goes on all the way throughout the year. And I've come into some of their sessions, which the students are working on it, and they absolutely love it. And the skills which they demonstrate during it, I think it's I'm a massive advocate for iTime, particularly within personalized learning.
This isn't just like, you know, here's some time, throw them into the arena and just see what pops out. Like, you're curating and sort of having the results happen with the students having a big say in that. But you've got some sort of guidance along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think that framework is important as much for the students as also for me. Whilst I am giving over a lot of responsibility, and that bit can be daunting, there needed to be that framework there.
Definitely.
Just for the students.
Yeah, I think Evan's going to be contacting you. You know, he's also sort of mentioned that, you know, imagine if the majority of the time was iTime. Like the ideal scenario would be where, you know, you could have all the learning objectives be met completely autonomously by students. You know what I mean? Like that would be ideal, wouldn't it?
That I'm sure that's got some people a little bit scared.
Without a doubt. But, you know, I think these are conversations that, you know, are really important to have. So thanks again for sharing it. You know, this is something that you should screen from every building that you could possibly get a chance to do, because this is something that's truly innovative, happening in other subject areas, but sort of bringing it into this PE realm is really quite unique. If you've got any questions, Twitter, go there, check it out. Go to the website and download the resources. And I think you'll also find a replay for this session there as well. And thanks again for putting your hand up to come and share it.
Awesome. Loved it. Thanks very much. Be doing it again, hopefully sometime soon.
Absolute pleasure. Speak soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.